Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for this conversation with Senator Peters, Director Ziegler, and Director Logan. So first things first, I will turn it over to Senator Peters for some opening remarks. Senator Peters, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Josh, and certainly appreciate everybody tuning in here for the Zoom call and talking about how we can make sure we're of assistance to small businesses, which are without question, the focus for me is to make sure that all of our small businesses can get the financing that you need and the help that you need to get through what is incredibly challenging time. We have three great panelists that are going to join me as well and talk about various efforts to help businesses across the area and our minority businesses across the area. Unfortunately, I know there have been some real challenges with the first Paycheck Protection Program and the way that it transpired. And we want to make sure, and I've always been concerned about this right from day one, is that we have to make sure that those businesses that are in the greatest need have access to those resources. What happened, I think, and you kind of would see that because we wanted to make sure we were getting the money out to businesses as quick as possible. Knowing that time is of the essence. And so we work with local banks and local credit unions in order to get that money out, a streamlined application form. But what probably happened, and we need to find out more information, is banks will tend to take care of their better customers first and then deal with other people later who may not be as big, but are probably the ones that aren't as big are the ones that actually need the money the most because they're smaller businesses that are also struggling through this COVID-19 crisis. So how do we take care of that? That was a part of the legislation that's going to be passing today and as well. I'll mention that. But first off, I think it's important for us also to have lessons learned from what happened in the last go around. And so I have instructed the General Accounting Office to give us a report. They are the accounting folks that the General Accounting Office or organization reports to Congress, lets us know exactly how money is spent, if it's being spent appropriately. It's about making sure there's proper accountability. So I specifically want to know who got the money and what were the criteria for that money. One area that I'm particularly concerned about is the fact, just Michigan at large too, is the fact that we're a big state. We're 10th in population in the country, and yet if you look at the money that went out through the program, we rank 35 out of 50 states. And to me, we should be equitable. We're not asking for more than anybody. We should be equitable in terms of it. So I want to get a better sense of why that happened. The GAO study is actually part of the CARES Act. I got that into the act when it passed. I'm the ranking member. It means I'm the top Democrat on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. We're the top oversight committee for the U.S. Senate. And we were able to put in some accountability to have IGs, inspector generals, to be able to make sure the money is being spent properly. But the GAO is particularly important. They report to Congress. They are required under the CARES Act to report to us within 90 days. Now we're about 60 days away from that report. But I think we need to get a full accounting of exactly how the paycheck plan worked and how that was distributed, so we can make sure that we are indeed taking care of those businesses that need it the most. And I've heard from minority businesses all across the state of the trouble, and so we pushed, and I pushed very aggressively, saying we have to have a carve out of this next tranche, which is coming today. And my understanding, the House is taking it up today as we speak. They're actually voting on it. This is something we voted on a couple days ago. But it'll provide money specifically into community development, financial institutions, minority depositor institutions. We're going to have Ken on from Independence Bank here shortly, as well as other ways to make sure that it's actually going into those communities that need the money. So it's basically $30 billion has been carved out of that. Now that means you can still have access to all the other money too, but I thought we needed to have a specific carve out of money, the $30 billion going to our minority depository institutions and community development institutions to make sure that money was going into that community. So I'm happy to say that's happened. In addition to the money for businesses there, two other aspects that are part of the legislation that is passing right now is additional money for hospitals that are also, as all of you know, strained considerably, And then the other aspect of it that has to be done for us to start opening our businesses up and do it in a safe way is we need a whole lot more testing. And there's money, $25 billion to expand testing. We have to know who's sick and who's not. You have to build confidence with the American people that as we open up businesses safely, you also have to have customers that feel comfortable that they can go outside and they can go there safely to their business. And that's going to mean personal protection equipment and testing. I'm intimately involved in those issues. The committee that I'm the ranking member on, in addition to dealing with the oversight of CARES, is the Homeland Security Committee. That means I oversee FEMA, which is responsible for the federal emergency management of this crisis. And that means getting more personal protection equipment, masks, and other things that we need, and the testing supplies. So be happy to talk about that at a later point as well. But again, thank you. I look forward to hearing your questions. I look forward to hearing your comments. Please know that I am committed to making sure that every business has the opportunity to get the resources necessary to survive. We want to get this economy started again safely. We want to do it quickly. And that does not happen if we lose small businesses. You are the engine of growth. That's where the economy is going to need your help going forward. And it's incumbent on the federal government to make sure we're providing those resources, and particularly for our minority businesses that I think did not get a fair share in the first tranche, and we got to make sure that that's happening now. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over back to Josh, and you're going to introduce our 3 outstanding panelists that I see are all online here and smiling and ready to go.
Yes, thank you, Senator. All right, so first is Director Constance Logan. She's the District Director of Michigan for the U.S. Small Business Administration. So in this role, she's responsible for the implementation of the SBA's programs and services in Michigan's 83 counties. So Director Logan, you are unmuted.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Senator Peters, and it's great to be here with this esteemed panel, Mr. Kelly, and also Ms. Ziegler. As you mentioned, we have really been very busy over the last couple months. I have a staff of 10 that covers the entire state of Michigan, all 83 counties. Right now, we're all safe. Everyone is teleworking, which is, of course, very important to me. We also have our resource partners that have been instrumental in helping us to deal with this pandemic. So we fund the small business development centers. We have women's business centers. We have a veterans outreach center. We have SCORE. We have truly been a family in terms of this crisis and coming together. Right now, we meet on a daily basis. We call it the partner huddle, to really talk about what our feet on the street, our SBDCs and councils are really hearing from the small business community. Because I know what we're hearing. We have a special email that's set up. Our staff are taking phone calls, and the phone calls that we're getting are just heartbreaking in terms of people losing their homes, their livelihood, not really understanding what the process is. And my team is very in tune to, providing hope. At the end of the day, individuals need to know that there's resources there to help them. But again, the challenge has been, how do you navigate the process? How do you access these funds? So there, of course, we're talking about the PPP, which is, of course, also a very important program that's provided through our lenders. And I'm glad Mr. Kelly is here, and he's going to provide some insight with that. But what we've heard over the last couple months, and when the PPP initially came out, is borrowers were having difficulty with accessing their lenders. We've heard some borrowers say that they've gone to lenders and they've had 25-year relationships, and because they don't meet that certain criteria, that particular borrower has turned them away. And that's been very prevalent. We've heard that a lot. So what my team has done is we've put together a very comprehensive list of all the SBA lenders that are SBA 7A lenders that are already approved. And we've also added to that list those lenders that have been approved through this process just to do PPP. Happy to report that we've had probably over 15 or so credit unions that are added to that list now. And so when borrowers call us, we provide that list because we need them to understand that they are important, and they should, if they need to shop the deal, they can shop the deal to find out what lender or borrower will, institution will give them access to the funds that they need. I'm real happy to announce, and again, I really can't comment on pending legislation, but I do know with this new tranche of funds, there's going to be some set asides. This is what I'm hearing. CDFIs, I'm glad Ms. Ziegler's here. And we do have some CDFIs that are SBA participants. We reached out to them in preparation for this, the new funds that are becoming available, to make sure that they have access to all of our systems. And so when it's time to push the button to go, they're ready to go. So we're very committed to make sure that all small businesses, particularly those that are really in those underserved communities, those are urban and rural, that really are the backbone and are not getting access to the funds that they need to start and sustain their small business. So we're very committed, and I would say with my team and all of our resource partners, MEDC, the state, we have really come together through this crisis to help small businesses. So hopefully I can share more information today about the PPP program, as well as our Idl program, which is an SBA direct loan. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may jump in, here, Josh.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator. You're unmuted.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And that's right. Thank you so much, Administrator Logan, for that briefing. That's important, the amount of money. And I know you didn't want to comment on legislation until it's actually passed, and it's happening as we speak. Yes. And I appreciate that. But the Idl program that you mentioned, I hope you'll spend more time talking about that during the Q&A as well. That's
sure.
going to be a $30 billion carve out for that. And for folks, that is a program that really helps small businesses
Yes.
get immediate infusion of cash. And then to deal with the CDFIs and as well as our minority financial institutions, that's $30 billion that's been carved out. So that's why it's great that Mr. Kelly is here. And I'll let you introduce our next panelist, but Ken, thank you for being here.
Excellent. So as the Senator mentioned, we have Ken Kelly. Ken is the CEO and chairman of First Independence Bank, which is the only minority depository institution in Michigan. So Mr. Kelly, you are go ahead and recognized.
Great. Thank you, Josh. And thanks so much, Senator Peters, for having us to have this discussion. It's so important right now that we really communicate and talk about the issues that are affecting the communities that we really care about. I want to start at the top because it's so important that we have individuals engaged in this process. So let me give you one example. We were the first to advocate for churches and nonprofits to be included in this process. We got a documented letter from, I believe, that we sent to Congresswoman Waters on March the 18th, putting that on record. And what that did is set the pace for all of the discussions that we had along the way, to include, to the credit of Administrator Carranza, that the ruling came out actually on April 4th, if I recall, that Saturday. But my point is, it's advocacy that will be sure that the opportunities are spread across the spectrum for the businesses that we care about. At First Independence, what we have found is we were able to meet the needs of the customers who came through the door in this first tranche. We got to a point where we were really pushing our threshold and our limit. But what we've done is made a concerted effort across the country with several of the GSIBs. Is one of the reasons I got to get off this call here at 4 o'clock, looking at ways we can basically synthetically get money to businesses that are in need. We know that the demand is very high for this. We know that minorities got left out in that first pass, and we want to hopefully be sure that they don't get left out in the second pass. My team right now is going through digital training with Finastra. We've had billionaire Robert Smith to donate to all of the minority banks the technology that will allow us to digitize this process so our employees aren't keystroking into the SBA system going forward. So want to share that with you, which is great news. But at the end of the day, we got to figure out a way to be sure that the businesses that are listening here, of the 179 people on this call, if you have a need, you can get in the system. Let me address one issue. I saw a question about a business that couldn't get into First Independence. We had instructed directly to our team not to turn anyone away. Now, that doesn't mean we have the capacity to serve you, because we didn't, but the intent is we want to try to serve you. So I will take the personal responsibility that if you don't mind sharing who you heard that from, we will get that corrected and get it addressed. What you will find on our website is the ability to look at all of the programs that matter, the EIDL. There should be $50 billion coming in through that program. And let me be clear, when I say coming in, those are not dollars that are at the banks. What is being loaned out in these processes are dollars that are already at banks. So the government has not given not one dime to any of the banks at this point in time. The banks are lending off their balance sheet. So when you go back to my comment of we didn't have capacity to pass through immediately, that's based on our current balance sheet and the lending that we're doing. But let me go back to the issue that matters to you, which is how can we help you? We are setting up on our website right now, as I said, the digitalization so that you could apply for it. We're also working in conjunction with another bank so that if we can't help you, we can hopefully get you in the process so that you can receive these funds. So I am also serving as a National Bankers Association chair. We are doing this across the network. Coming out probably within the hour, you will see a press release from Sean Combs, and it is titled Our Fair Share, with a focus on minority communities and being sure that they can get plugged into this process. So if there's anything that we can do from the perspective of First Independence Bank, you have the free opportunity to reach out to me, or you can go directly to our website, which is www.firstindependence.com. So Senator, again, thank you so much for having us. I do want to clarify one point, and this is again back to not the newscast, but kind of the details. So it made reference that there's $30 billion set aside for minority institutions and CDFIs. The fine print is that's about 90% of all banks that are 10 billion or less. So we're going to still be competing in this Hunger Games race. I want to be real clear about that. We will be a very small tranche out of the roughly 5,000 banks that's inside of that. Now, I will tell you what they're fighting for in the House right now is to get a subset of clarity that will go specifically towards minority communities, but that's another debate for another day. I don't know that they're going to get that passed today, but the intent is we're going to need the advocacy of everyone that's in the sound of my voice here to be sure that individuals who will fight for us, like Senator Peters, Senator Stabenow, et cetera, who will hear your voices so that they will have the wherewithal to stand there and ask for these things that we need for our community. So again, Senator, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. And I think it was a very important distinction you put out there, is that there's still a lot of those institutions. So it is important for folks to get in early to do that. And we got to see how this works. And it's also the other money, even though that's a carve out set aside to make sure that smaller institutions get it, you still have the bigger pot as well. But we know that just didn't work quite as well as any of us would have liked. There is more money available there. But I think, given, and I hope we're in a better position in 8 weeks, because this is 8 weeks of help for folks for payroll. I hope we're in a better position, but I'm not. I don't know that. I mean, and this crisis seems to change every 24 hours, and so it's hard to predict where that's going to be. But I can assure you that I'm committed, and I think my colleagues are all committed. We understand we got to be in here for the long haul for small businesses as well. So I would not be surprised to see more legislation, more funding that's going to be available. And if you mentioned the Hunger Games competition, if we need to be putting more resources in, we just have to do that. And you certainly have my commitment to continue to fight for that, as I fought for this tranche right now. So Josh, you want to introduce our next panelist, and last but not least, all equal panelists, but thank you again, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yep, so we have Ms. Tachira Ziegler. She is the Executive Director of the Detroit Cdfi Coalition, that's Community Development Financial Institution, and she is also the Executive Director of the Detroit Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC. So Ms. Ziegler, you may go ahead.
Okay, thanks so much, Josh. Thank you, Senator Peters, for having us. When I say us, I am representing not only LISC, but several other CDFIs that are in the coalition. Can you hear me okay? All right, so I'm going to share a screen. I want to show a little bit about demand, but also just in terms of the CDFIs and what they're seeing on the ground. And hopefully that can help to inform a little bit more too of the conversation. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do this. And okay, can everybody see that okay? All right. So this is a presentation. I'm going to talk just for a second about LISC, our mission, but it's really, I would say, across a number of CDFIs in terms of the way that they are working to really invest in inclusive communities of opportunity across the country. So these are great places to live, work, visit, do business, and raise families. And you talked a lot about the previous allocation of funds for the PPP program, so I won't go into detail. Didn't know if there were folks that wanted to know more about the program initially, and so this gives a little bit of that background about the loans in terms of how payments are deferred for 6 months with that maturity rate of 2 years and interest rate of 1%. So want to get right into the Cdfi Coalition. We organized ourselves informally in 2014, and we're a very collaborative group of CDFIs working together. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we're promoting community development, stimulating growth within the market of Detroit, which includes job creation, employment, and small business supports. And overall, we're trying to revitalize neighborhoods in Detroit. So currently, we have 14 CDFIs that are all members, and then 10 partner members. So our partner members, those include partners that could be quasi-governmental organizations or small business entities that provide technical assistance, and then of course nonprofits. And we meet bi-weekly and we collaborate on neighborhood investment, but also policy opportunities like we're discussing today. So currently within our coalition, we have 7, that's almost half of our Cdfi coalition are able to be PPP lenders. Here's the list here in front of you. And I'm going to go into a little bit of an overview of each one and where they are in terms of being able to provide capital access to businesses. So first I'll start with CRF USA. They're partnering with Kresge Foundation and Goldman Sachs, and they're providing PPP supports. To date, what they're seeing is about 11.9 million in applications from both nonprofits and small businesses, and how they broke that down is 6.5 million is coming in from the nonprofits themselves, and then 5.4 million coming into small businesses. And they're really awaiting that new announcement that that the senator mentioned is being voted on as we speak. We also are supportive of Detroit Development Fund. Their goal is to deploy at least $2 million in Detroit for their existing customers, and they are a huge technical assistance provider and loan provider for a number of programs, including entrepreneurs of color. So they have access for customers that we're talking about. Lake Trust Credit Union, they're also serving as a PPP lender, and more details to come there. But we're really glad to see a credit union in our coalition that's able to play this role. And then Liberty Bank is also a PPP lender, and their goal is to deploy $45 million nationwide, and that's Detroit and then some other areas of the country as well. So for LISC, we have a subsidiary that's serving as our SBA PPP lender. We're providing technical assistance, as you mentioned earlier, about being able to make sure that minority businesses are able to queue up for the applications. And so we're providing assistance to them one-on-one. And then we also, when we look at our portfolio of lending, but also the customers that we serve, both nonprofits and minority and women businesses, we're seeing about 105 customers that could be eligible for this program. And when you think about how much money is coming out, we really know that we'll be oversubscribed as you think about Michigan. We're looking at 17 nonprofits and 39 minority and women businesses. And those that we're talking about are not engaged in housing. We've vetted about 24 at this time, and then we're helping them through the process just in terms of getting ramped up for the application. Then you have NDC, which is, they have a Grow America Fund. They have $80 million available nationwide. Of course, their preference is to their communities they serve, which includes Detroit, and they have already 150 inquiries before their portal is even active. 30 applications currently that they're looking at and ready to submit for the second round. And then Opportunity Resource Fund, their goal is to provide around $2 million, if not more, in PPP loans. What they're seeing on the ground is 65 applications. Those were processed for 1.2 million, which represented about almost close to 300 jobs. One loan was accepted in the first round, and then they plan to submit others for the second round. So that's just a really summary for what we're seeing on the ground. Just in terms of LISC and in terms of what the other CDFIs are able to provide is obviously technical assistance for the application documentation, and we can share this with your audience if they need the resources. They're also helping with the calculation and technical assistance for the 6-step payroll calculation, including resources specifically for minority and small businesses and contractors. So we have 2 staff people at LISC that are working on this for Michigan, including Kalamazoo, Flint, and Detroit. You have Sue Eck and then Anthony Batiste from the Detroit office, and so their contact information is there. So we wanted to just give you an overview of the Cdfi Coalition, what we're seeing, and kind of what resources are available as we're trying to all mitigate the barrier of providing capital to small businesses with the program. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Ms. Ziegler. Thank you for that opening. Mr. Kelly, I know that you have Mr. Kelly, I know you have to head out to an important meeting, but I know we have a couple questions. You have time for a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
We'll start with you, and then we'll go to our other panelists and take on others, but I know folks are anxious to talk with you. So Josh, if you could give Mr. Kelly the first of a couple questions.
Of course. So the first question for you, Mr. Kelly, is if I've applied through your bank for a PPP loan before the funds went dry, do I have to reapply, or will you process the existing application?
The existing application should carry weight. You shouldn't have to reapply. Now, if you were denied, and I know inside of our institutions we had just 2 of those for reasons that were beyond the bank and or some obligations prior to this being a federal loan program. So my point is, if you've applied and it's there in the gate, it should be ready to go again, is the best way I can describe it.
Excellent. And then another quick question for you is, does First Independence Bank only work with minority small businesses as a minority depository institution, or can anyone apply for PPP funds through your bank?
No, that's one of the greatest misnomers in all of mankind, is the fact that a minority bank or a Black bank or African-American bank only caters to that ethnicity. That's just not true. So we take all and we will serve all in the same manner. So that's just not true. What is true is that it's a minority controlled bank that has, even in our mission and vision, an affinity for African Americans as it relates to financial inclusion. So that is a true statement, but we have all types inside of our institution from a lending and depository perspective.
Wonderful. And so we have one more question for you before you have to run. So we have heard one of the bigger problems through the first tranche of PPP loans is that banks worked almost exclusively with their existing customers. Can you speak a little bit to how a small business who might not have that existing relationship can work with you or your bank moving forward to try and get some of these PPP funds?
Great question. I should know these numbers. I've had so many of them in my head, so it won't be accurate, but I'll give you an close approximate range. We had somewhere in the range of close to 30 to 40% who were new customers, meaning that we don't have a depository or a savings account or a checking account relationship with them. So to my point earlier, we had our arms open, and several of them were from much larger institutions, but we were able to take them in, get them served, get their PPP served in a way that they were not able to do that with their existing institutions. So our arms have been open. Again, as we're getting to our capacity limit, we're having to shift our strategy a little bit, but the intent is we're going to be working to serve the people who need to be served.
Excellent. Well, we know you have to run, Mr. Kelly, so thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'll say good luck to everyone in this process. Senator Peters, thank you for your leadership. Thank my co-panelists there, Constance. We've been on this circuit for a while now. I know Tachira and I, this is probably our first one together, but I'm sure that I will see you all around. So thanks so much for having us, Senator, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, we appreciate you taking time here. I know you're busy, and you're going to be really busy after today as well. So we look forward to continuing to work with you, and we want to bring as much of that money here into Michigan as we possibly can. So let us know.
Absolutely. But thanks for your leadership. You all take care.
Take care. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
So I guess with that, Josh, I know we have a number of questions that have been coming in. If you want to kind of take charge of questions for the panelists.
Absolutely. So we've got a bunch. So I will start with one for you, Director Logan. It's quite simple. Can you please explain what EIDL funding is and how that differs from the PPP?
Yes, so the EIDL program is our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So that's a direct loan from the SBA. So you apply directly to the SBA. And once a state is declared a disaster, in this case it's the coronavirus, the state has to go through a whole delegation process in terms of declaring the state a disaster that has occurred. And you can apply for our disaster loan program. It's up to $2 million, 30-year term at a 3.75% interest rate. And it's to be used for working capital. With the coronavirus, also now nonprofits are also included in that. So the main difference is the Idl loan is a direct SBA loan. The PPP is a loan program that's delivered through the banks. And that's why Mr. Keller was here. It only goes, the SBA guarantees it at 100%. So the risk is minimized. But the difference really is one is through the SBA, it's a disaster loan program. The terms are a little bit different in terms of PPP. PPP is up to $10 million, 2-year, and as someone mentioned earlier, 1%. But that's the key difference.
Wonderful, thank you. I have, I guess, a good follow-up question for that is someone in our one of our participants has applied for an Idl loan, but did not hear back from the SBA. Is there a method to check where the application stands in the process, or will that have to be taken up when and if and when the Idl program is reauthorized?
Yes, so full disclosure, if you can imagine, as I mentioned, the disaster loan, typically when a disaster happens, it's maybe a certain county, 2 or 3 counties, but this occurred throughout the entire nation. So if you apply for the disaster loan, at this particular time, there isn't a way to check the status, but if you email my office at michigan@sba.gov, the checks are continuously being sent out in the approval process in terms of decline or approval, you're being notified. But if you have not received anything, email us at michigan@sba.gov, and we are taking a look at where you are in the process. So if you applied, and again, if you haven't heard, I would still go ahead and apply again during this next round. But definitely do that. But just go ahead and email us with your number. You should have a confirmation number. And with that confirmation number, we are working internally to come up with a system to get you status.
Excellent, thank you. Next question for Ms. Ziegler. Ms. Ziegler, we have a question saying, which CDFIs currently are accepting and processing PPP loans? And if they are not, are there current plans, do you know of any, to apply to become eligible?
Sure, absolutely. There are 7 that are working to become lenders. There are currently half are actually taking applications, which would be CRF. USA would be one, and NDC would be another. There's a couple that are raising funds to be able to bridge the capital, and so they're still in fundraising mode, but they'll be ready, and they're trying to get ramped up here as soon as this legislation is approved, and probably waiting on their just to get their final approvals for capital. There are, I would say, the other one that you would want to contact directly would be Detroit Development Fund, which is an organization that is also ramped up and ready to take applications. So we're still vetting them. We are still in a position where we're trying to wait for the guidance and the legislation, and trying to see where the nonprofits that we support will fit into this process, and where, if they fit in. And so we're still waiting on our approval.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so I have a question for the senator. Senator, what are you doing at the federal level to help ensure the next round of PPP loans actually goes to small businesses that need the money?
Well, that is critical to do that, and that's why the way we've structured this second tranche is to make sure that we have some money put directly to CDFIs, to minority depository institutions, to community banks, credit unions in underserved areas, because that's where we're particularly concerned that the money didn't go out like it should have to those businesses that were most in need. I'm sure all the businesses that applied have needs. I'm not saying they didn't, but some of the ones that are most in need are going to be the ones that may not have been at the front of that line, because the money went very, very, very quickly. And so that is why it was important for us to basically carve that out. Now, I'll say that just although that money is going specifically to CDFIs and minority depository institutions, for example, that doesn't preclude the other pot from also being used. So everybody continues to have access to the full amount. We just want to make sure if that full amount goes quickly, there's still money available for those institutions in underserved areas. I mentioned before in the opening about the oversight activities that I've been engaged in too, is that because we want to find out more exactly who received the PPP in that first round. And, part of that, the way it was structured through the banks and through credit unions, and not directly through the SBA as the Idl is because we knew the SBA is used to doing about 35 billion, I think, Mr. Logan, a year, 35 billion. And this was 350 billion in a matter of a few days. And so we needed to get money out to businesses right away. But now we want to make sure those folks who actually needed it were the ones that got it. There wasn't any fraud and abuse. And that's why I've asked the GAO to exercise the authorities that I wrote into the CARES Act for them to investigate and to give us data back. And I mentioned earlier what I'm troubled about for the state of Michigan is that we're the 10th largest state in the country in terms of population. But in terms of money coming into our state, we were 35 out of 50. That's unacceptable. We need to be at least getting our fair share. And I think by having this oversight now from the GAO, and banks and other institutions are going to know that this oversight is going to occur. I've always found when people know they're going to be looking at you and there's going to be sunshine, people tend to be more careful exactly how that money is going out the door. So that's going to be important. But again, we're going to focus on making sure we're preserving money to go into those underserved areas, so that doesn't go right away. And at the same token, as I mentioned earlier too, is that if there's more aid that's going to be available, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, I'm going to continue to focus to make sure underserved areas get the resources they need. It is those areas that are it's most critical that they get the resources they need, so that when we are able to safely reopen, we can do that in a much quicker way, and we can strengthen our communities. And I'll just mention briefly too, is that, and it came up a couple times, is that these loans are also available for nonprofits as well as religious groups, but nonprofits. And when you think about nonprofits, we need our nonprofit organizations more than ever right now during this crisis, and we want them to continue to have financial resources. Their donations are going to be going down because people are concerned about their bills and the concern with the crisis. But we need places like food banks operating now more than ever. They should have the resources to make sure they can keep their people working and organize their volunteers to continue those services. So especially with the CDFIs and others engaged. We want to make sure that this money is going out as broadly as possible to everybody that needs it, and that is critically important.
Excellent. So our next question is for Director Logan. Director Logan, if you have already received PPP and it is running out as you continue to process payroll, can you apply for future PPP loans? I know you can't speak to the status of legislation, but I guess to boil that down, can someone apply for PPP twice if they have used the existing funds that they have?
No, there's a max of 10 million. So ideally, we tell business owners to make sure when you are going to apply that you understand the full parameters of how much money you need. So yeah, once you apply once, you can't apply again. Excellent.
All right, so a question now for Ms. Ziegler is, I have already applied at another company. Obviously, PPP funds are now exhausted. Should I reapply with one of the CDFIs that is currently processing PPP loans in advance of a second package?
I would almost defer to Director Logan on that one, just in terms of the queue for the SBA once someone has already applied. That's not clear to me in terms of the guidance. I do want to just mention, though, there is another CDFI that you can apply for that I didn't mention, and that was OpFund. So that is another CDFI that's taking applications, but I would defer to Director Logan on that one, just in terms of.
Sure, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Could you repeat the question, please?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was, I have applied for a PPP fund at a different organization, but I did not hear back. Should I apply for a PPP loan with one of the CDFIs that is processing? So basically, can you apply for these loans in two separate places?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you have not heard back, that means your loan wasn't processed. The only way that you know that your loan is processed and you're good is if you receive an SBA loan number. If you do not have that, that means either one, you were denied, or two, it hasn't been processed.
Okay.
So I would run to your bank or the CDFI right away and go ahead and put the application in. So if and when the funds are approved, you're already in queue. So absolutely, you can do that.
Okay, great.
Excellent. So another question for the Senator. Senator, we know that this is the 3.5 package. What is the status of an additional fourth stimulus package, and what do you envision being included in said package?
Well, I believe there will be another package. We're continuing to try to deal with all of the problems associated with the crisis, and as everybody on the Zoom here knows, that we're dealing with both a public health crisis and an economic crisis at the same time, and both of those things we're going to have to continue to deal with them. But first off, we got to deal with the public health crisis. We've got to be able to make sure that we're able to slow down the spread of this disease and make sure we can protect people from mass kinds of infections and overwhelm our hospital system. But at the same token, make sure that we have businesses that can survive through this time so we can start back up again. So part of what we're looking at is kind of stepping back and where are there gaps. We passed the CARES Act was over $2 trillion, unprecedented amount of money. This next one is close to $500 billion. I think it's so at 350 or 400 some billion dollars in this package. So there's more money that's being put in, but we believe that there's going to have to be additional funds that'll be needed as well. And where are those areas? I will say it's still in negotiation, so it's a little uncertain where it is. I've mentioned already on the call, if small businesses continue to need help, I'm sure that's going to be a priority we're going to look at. I'm going to be concerned about whether or not 8 weeks is enough time for folks to get through this, and then particularly companies that may need some capital to restart and to reboot their business. There may be demands there that we're going to have to look at. So I think those are kinds of concepts that we're thinking about. The other one that we were attempting to get into this legislation that didn't get in is to help our state and local governments and local governments. You think about City of Detroit and other municipalities all across the state are now seeing their revenues drop. They're seeing their expenses increase. There was money available in the original CARES Act for that, but it's pretty clear the cost and the impact of this crisis is significant. And we need to make sure we're stabilizing. In my mind, the federal government needs to help stabilize our state and local government. So I think there's going to be a big push to continue to deal with that.
Excellent. So for Director Logan, a question: is the SBA able to offer any debt consolidation options for rural or minority or women-owned businesses? I'm reading, who are currently funded by CDFIs that now qualify for SBA loans. It seems counterproductive to apply 2 or 3 times for PPP, EIDL, and a separate loan.
So it seems that you're combining the 7A loan and PPP, and unfortunately, no, you can't use this particular loan program to consolidate debt. That's actually in the regulations. So unfortunately, you can't do that. I understand you're going different ways, but unfortunately, you can't use PPP to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. For Ms. Ziegler, do CDFIs locally plan to report how many minority business enterprises in Michigan have received PPP loans?
Absolutely. We all have reporting requirements, and of course we are visiting with our senators on an annual basis to report out how we're doing in terms of investing for those minority businesses. Absolutely. Important metric, especially for this program.
Absolutely. And then just to follow up on that for Director Logan, we have a similar question. Is the SBA planning on releasing data breaking down certain characteristics and demographics that have received PPP loans?
My understanding is that is the plan. It has not been released as of to date. We have the numbers for the state of Michigan, but it's not broken down by city count or demographics, but we have requested that information. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be important data. Excellent.
All right, we're moving through these quickly. So Senator, I have a question for you now on unemployment. So it's a small business owner that is worried. They say, my employees are currently making more money at home through the expanded unemployment bill that was included in the CARES Act. Can you touch on how this will affect my business and how I can get my employees back, when it is safe to reopen?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just, before I say it, just build on Director Logan's comment too about the data coming in. That's the GAO report that I talk about, is to bring that in as well. So we can get that kind of information from the SBA through the GAO. So that information will be made public, hopefully as soon as we can. And I appreciate Director Logan's focus on that, because I know she understands how important that is to get that. From the unemployment perspective, there is, we were under the CARES Act. We expanded unemployment compensation dramatically as to who qualifies. And that includes, first off, in answering that question, first off, it includes small business owners. So if you are a small business owner, you can now apply for unemployment if suddenly your business now does not generate money, you don't have an income, you're a sole proprietor, if you're an independent contractor, you're part of the gig economy, all of those, if you fall into any of those categories, you can actually apply for unemployment. It's actually the legislation that I wrote. I wrote the Pandemic Assistance Act, and that was incorporated into this CARES Act, which allows all of these individuals to now be able to qualify for unemployment. And it's really patterned after the work that I do on disaster assistance. My work with FEMA is that when a hurricane comes into a region and people are suddenly unemployed, we open up unemployment comp through the federal government. So people who suddenly have lost their job can get some money, get on their, and make sure they can put food on the table till things get built up again. Same concept here, except the hurricane now is sweeping across the entire country. It's not just a region, and that's why it expands going forward. So I've had a small business owner, in fact, who I just talked to recently. She had a cleaning business. Her customers didn't want anyone to come in to clean, and her employees didn't want to go into those houses because of their concerns. She suddenly was without any income, She's applied for unemployment and is now getting unemployment so she can pay the bills until she can start her business up again when things pass. So on the question of the extra amount of money, that's also part of it. When you get unemployment, there's now a $600 additional payment per week for anybody on unemployment. Unemployment is paid for by the state, and that's anywhere from $150 to $350 a week. But you get an additional $600 a week from the federal government for 4 months. That'll go through July. So folks will be getting that. I've heard from businesses concerned about folks who are on unemployment and trying to have an incentive to come back to work. I'm going to mention two things because there are ways to do that. First off is that if you can get into the WorkShare program through the state of Michigan. WorkShare says if you have an employee and you don't need them for 40 hours a week, but you have 10 hours of work for them, you can go into WorkShare, you pay them for the 10 hours a week that they work for you. The remaining 30 hours that they're not working would qualify them for unemployment, and the unemployment system would kick in to make up that difference. So you can still keep people on your payroll. They'll still be making their roughly, the money that they would make, even if they may only be working 10 hours for you. The other thing to remember too, as you're starting up your businesses again, when we can safely do that, as you're starting up businesses, if you want to bring some employees back on your payroll, but it's not full time right away, and people are on unemployment now, it's important to remember you can pay up to $450 per week to an employee, and they can still stay on their unemployment during that time. So I think there's ways for part of that, and we're still looking if there needs to be additional flexibility, because we know you need your people to come back to start working as you're starting up your businesses, and we want to make sure that there's not a disincentive for any of that happening, and folks will make more money coming back and earning money and getting unemployment. But I think that's really good for the economy, because those folks are going to spend every penny in the economy as we come out of this, and that's going to be good to jumpstart businesses all throughout all of our communities.
Excellent, thank you. For Director Logan, two-part question. One, can you get both a PPP and an EIDL loan? And if so, does receiving an EIDL loan reduce the amount of PPP you are eligible for?
So the answer to your question, yes, you can get both. And it all depends upon how you use the money. For example, with the EIDL, you need to make sure that you're not using that money for any payroll expenses, because the PPP is for payroll. So if you use the Idl loan for working capital, the other areas that you can use it, you can absolutely have both. You just can't use, you can't have use the PPP for payroll and Idl. As long as you don't mix it up, then you're good. Excellent,
thank you. For Ms. Ziegler, I have a specific question. Are there any CDFIs in the St. Clair area? And if not, how can minority-owned small businesses and women-owned small businesses contact a CDFI? Is there a comprehensive list of these CDFIs?
Yes, we do have a comprehensive list, and several of our CDFIs work in Michigan. They're statewide. I know I mentioned earlier Opportunity Fund, OpFund. That particular CDFI is a statewide CDFI that may be interested in that area. But you can go to our website. It's www.Detroit Coalition, CDFI Coalition.org. And that will give you the whole list of the CDFIs and all of their resources, even COVID-related resources beyond the PPP.
Thank you. So back to you, Senator. Senator, someone has concerns about timing on the loan forgiveness portion of PPP funds. Specifically, quote, I think the PPP loan forgiveness needs to be extended, or the time allowed to bring everyone back on payroll needs to be more closely timed, with the country being able to get back to business. Can you address these concerns?
I think it's a great question, and I think that we are definitely looking at that very closely. I think I mentioned earlier that I am concerned about whether or not 8 weeks is going to be sufficient time. It's hard to know right now, and I think we've got to be watching that very closely, if whether or not there's going to have to be some sort of extension or what sort of flexibility is going to have to be built into that program. When we talked about the fourth piece of legislation and others, I think we're all aware of that and of the complexity of that. and making sure we don't get to a position where you run out of those resources and then we have folks, what do they do then? Again, depending on where we are with the crisis. Hopefully we'll be in a better shape in the next 8 weeks than we are now. I want to be confident about that and think we will, but we have to prepare for every kind of contingency going forward. And then I mentioned, and probably just reiterate, I mentioned in the previous answer to the question too. I mean, I understand too that when coordinating as folks are starting to reopen, there may need help for businesses to start reopening, which requires additional resources for that. So those are things that we're thinking about right now. There are a number of proposals that are being kicked around. I don't want to get into any specifics because they're just proposals right now. But to answer the question, I'm definitely thinking about that a lot, and we'll be advocating for making sure we're taking care of the needs of small businesses at that time.
Excellent. So for Director Logan, a question. If we have all independent 1099 employees we pay and we are still paying them, do we qualify for the PPP?
All 1099. So that's a tricky one. It all depends upon.
Excellent. And I think this is going to be our final question for Ms. Ziegler and a little bit for Director Logan as well. What are the credit requirements for the PPP and the EIDL? And do they vary from lender to lender, or are they uniform across all PPP lenders?
So with respect to the IDL program, the credit criteria has been lessened. I don't know the exact score. That's something that's really not shared. But in terms of credit elsewhere, meaning that you can't get credit elsewhere, that's normally the criteria with SBA, that doesn't apply. So it's easier to apply for and receive the Idl loan. In terms of the PPP loan, same thing. There is a credit score required, and it's not across the board. You have to really deal with bank to bank, but the credit score has been lessened. So I would really make sure that you talk to your bank. As a matter of fact, if you're interested, I would make sure you're talking to your bank today or tomorrow before this next round of funds come out. So just make sure you talk to them, see where they are with their criteria, because it's not consistent.
And I'll provide a list of all of the CDFIs that we listed here that were PPP lenders, so that folks can talk to them directly about what the requirements are per CDFI.
Excellent. Well, to our panelists, thank you so much for your insight. And now I will toss it back over to the Senator for some brief closing remarks.
Yeah, I'll be real brief. I just want to thank our panelists, Ms. Logan and Ms. Ziegler. Thank you so much. And appreciate you being here, and Ken as well earlier, but to answer these questions. I know we had a lot of questions come. I'm sure we didn't get to all those questions, and I think we're collecting those, Josh. We're going to try to get back to folks who may not have had questions answered. But both of you are doing an outstanding job. It's a tough job, but it's critically important of what you do every day. So I just can't thank you enough, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy days, because you're both extremely busy, to answer these questions. But I want to thank everybody who's tuned in here as well in the Zoom for being with us. I stand ready to help in any way. My staff stands ready to help in any way. Please let us know how we can be helpful, and also give us some ideas of what's working, what's not working, how we can improve on the next bill as it goes forward. But again, it's my commitment to continue to stand behind our small businesses to make sure you have the resources that you need in order to survive. You are the heart and soul of our communities, the folks who create the jobs and provide the financial stability for families all throughout our community. And we need to make sure that you stay healthy and vibrant. And I'm going to keep working on that every day that I can. So again, thanks for being here. Stay safe. In the end, we're going to be stronger in the end, but we got to get through this, and we will get through it. But again, everybody, please stay healthy and stay safe. And thanks for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks so much.
All right, again, thank all of our panelists and the Senator for being here. So just for all of our attendees that are still here, as the Senator mentioned, we will be following up with some additional information after the call. Again, some critical websites you can check out for information. That is www.peters.senate.gov/coronavirus. There's also sba.gov/coronavirus. And the emails that Director Logan shared were constance.logan@sba.gov and michigan@sba.gov. So again, thank you all so much for tuning into this roundtable with Senator Peters. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedules. And as the Senator said, please stay safe and we will follow up. Thank you all so much.